He wants to change the process for responding to certain natural disasters.
In Lincoln today, they spoke in favor of legislation that they say would make it more efficient. Our Joe Harris now with the details.
OPPD says an ice jam on the Missouri River in December 2022 caused units at their power stations to go offline, impacting the larger power grid.
A lot of them tripped off because of the ice jams jamming up our intakes for cooling. And our power plants go in self-survival mode and they'll shut themselves down.
They say because it happened over Christmas, it delayed connecting with county officials to get resources to respond to the emergency. That's why on Wednesday, State Senator Rountree of Bellevue brought a bill on behalf of the Power District to a committee.
The goal of the bill is to streamline the communication that takes place during an emergency situation and allow quicker response times to natural disasters.
If LB 546 passes, utilities like OPPD would be able to bypass county authorities and go straight to the governor to request an emergency declaration. The Power District was the only one that testified in favor of the bill. Opponents, like the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency, say the bill is redundant because of current state statutes.
The governor has the authority to declare a vital resource emergency when the interruption of supplies or resources or the threat of such interruption may cause severe hardship or threaten the health and lives of the citizens of the state.
They believe it would actually lead to more confusion while responding to natural disasters because of how many subdivisions the bill would allow access to the governor.
If that authority is granted by LB 546 during an emergency,
if LB 546 passes,
multiple requests to the governor from within a single county, rather than one comprehensive request from the local government.
OPPD says it's willing to refine the language in the bill. In Omaha, Joe Harris, First Alert 6.
LB 546 first must get out of committee before senators debate it on the floor.